My friends, good day. Today we're going to talk about an extremely serious incident that happened at Nice Airport this Sunday. In fact, during the night from Sunday to Monday on runway 04R, we narrowly escaped a tragedy. Two Airbus A320s carrying 300 people. At the end of the video, I'll also talk to you about some new directions I want to give to this channel to ensure its sustainability, long-term sustainability, if I may say so, right? So let's get back to this Sunday. We have a situation, the media talked about it a lot, but you'll see that it's a situation in a way, I almost want to say inevitable. There was nothing from the controller nor from the pilots of either of the planes. There was no bad faith, no incompetence, no obvious risk-taking. There was none of that, just guys doing their job. And you'll see a situation will arise against which, if you look closely, there is little or no protection. What saved these passengers, about 300 of them it seems, was just the reaction of the pilot, of the worker. I'll repeat, maybe the setting. We are at Nice Airport, a very busy place, the third busiest airport in France, busy in France. It has two parallel runways. These two runways extend far out over the sea. And then they are numbered, so 04 right, 04 left, right. They're different lengths, so these runways don't start at the same spot. 04 left is shorter than 04 right. How do you manage interactions and takeoffs with both a short and long runway? So obviously the takeoffs will go on the longer runway, the 04 right, a little over 2,900 meters. Why? Because we want to give the planes the possibility, the greatest distance to do what we call acceleration stop. So there are no runway limitations, so the planes can accelerate up to a decision speed. For example, if an engine fails just before that speed, you can brake and still stay on the runway without going off into the surroundings. So you always want to give the longest runway to the planes that are taking off. The shortest runway, 04 left of this one, is 2,500 and some meters, 2,500 meters and a bit more. So obviously we're going to use it for landings. So that night, that's what was starting to take shape. Now, let's talk about the main characters. We have two Airbus A320s. We have an Airbus from the Easyjet company that's going to Nantes. It's going to take off for Nantes, and it was already running quite late because it's going to happen around 11:30 post-meridian. It's almost midnight, it's dark, obviously it's raining. There's a very heavy rain that's going to reduce visibility. There were still cumulonimbus clouds with strong vertical development, heavy rains. This will actually reduce visibility, even if the weather report often gives the prevailing visibility, which is not always indicative of the actual conditions that pilots will encounter during the approach. So the Easyjet flights had been delayed several times during the evening because, quite simply, the weather was terrible. So they were waiting for a good weather window to take off. They had been cleared to taxi. They taxied to runway 04 right, the one used for takeoffs. And then they were entering the runway to line up with its axis. Another key player is about to enter the scene. Comes into play. It's Nouvelair. You don't hear much about this airline on this channel. Unfortunately, it's a Tunisian airline, which, by the way, is older than Easyjet. They were founded in 86, and Easyjet, you have to wait until the early 90s to see them arrive. So Nouvelair is an airline that's older than Easyjet. They arrive on an Airbus A320. But here, there's something special. I'll tell you about it. It's that Nice Airport, like many airports today. Not just Nice Airport. It has a specific approach. Why? Because if the plane arrives on the runway axis and makes a normal approach by doing a long approach, a long final, well, it will fly over Cap d'Antibes. By flying over Cap d'Antibes, it will make noise. Most airports today are actually in conflict with local residents, the people living nearby. So the people living nearby often set up microphones, make recordings, sometimes even have them validated, have them certified by a bailiff, and so they file complaints quite regularly. It only takes a plane arriving just maybe 100 feet lower or 50 meters off its axis, and people will make phone calls. They'll send registered letters with acknowledgement of receipt. So what happens? On runway 04, this is how the planes arrive. In fact, instead of arriving in line with the runway, well, they literally come in at a 45-degree angle to it. So when they're coming in, I'll show you some footage during the editing. I'll show you some images taken during the day, but keep in mind, it's actually nighttime. I'll show you the image that the pilots see during the approach. In fact, the pilots keep the runway on their right until they're about 500 feet. Basically, that means at the last minute, they make a right turn to line up. So they're in landing configuration, they see the exits, everything is ready, and they're not aligned with the runway. At the last minute, they'll turn 45 degrees, and then they suddenly line up with it literally 30 seconds before touchdown. This will play a role that night. That's why I told you at the beginning of the video that all the ingredients were in place for the main characters, despite themselves, to be thrown into this story. So now, as I was saying, the new aircraft is cleared to land on runway 04 left. The pilots are approaching, so keep in mind it's nighttime, it's raining, and the windows are wet. How do the lights look when there's humidity, even with the wipers and everything through the rain? How do you see the lights? You see the lights as blurry glowing dots, right? And you see them everywhere. What do you see? There are the city lights. There are the millions of lights from the city of Nice and beyond. You see the runways, the taxiways, which also have thousands of lights. Isn't that right? Each one looks blurry, doesn't it? And in there are 3 lights, aren't there? Plus the beacon at the bottom, and on top we put 5 in total. Some lights, which are those of an Easyjet that's on the runway. So you see that you can't just take a quick look and say, oh, look, there's a plane. You can't do that. The Easyjet crew doesn't see anything because it's happening behind them. They had been cleared to line up. So yes, what do we learn at the Flying Club? At the Flying Club, we learn that when we enter the runway, we take a look. Despite the clearance from air traffic controllers, we do this. We look down the runway. No one is coming. We look on the runway. There's no one there. And we check if someone is coming in against the QFE, someone who is approaching from the other direction. That's part of the game. The body's always moving like this. Checked, even on an Aero Club plane. Now, Easyjet pilots, when they make that gesture, they see nothing. Why? Because it's in the dark. And at this stage, while they're turning to line up with the runway, the new air isn't aligned. They won't see it. It's farther away. It's probably in the rain at such a distance that they won't be able to see it. You see, it's very peculiar. They're going to line up afterwards. Now, the rest of the story happens behind their backs. They won't be able to realize at all what's happening. The new air, meanwhile, is starting its turn. We told him runway 04, right? But that's it, which is the first runway he sees. The first runway he sees is 04, right? Which is the closest to him. 04 left, I made a quick mistake. It's easy to get confused. 04 left, right, it happens fast. Look, I'm sitting quietly in my seat. There's no rain, no turbulence, no vibration. There's nothing at all. It's not night. I'm not falling asleep. It's 5 post-meridian daytime. See? I just took the wrong runway while talking to you, but it wasn't intentional. The pilot's plane is tilted, so they must make a sharp 45-degree turn. The first runway they see is 04, right? That's not the one they're supposed to land on. They have to go land on one that's farther away. 04 left doesn't start at the same spot. It's parallel, but begins farther away. That's the point. Once they see the runway, they say, that's the one, that's the line, and are happy to land. For them, landing is just seconds away. And suddenly, by a miracle, truly a miracle, they were probably, let's say, when they saw that there was something strange, they were probably flying over the runway threshold. They were likely about 50 feet or 12 to 15 meters above the ground, roughly speaking, right? And then they see the E-jets filling their window, literally. So what do? They take the throttle, they increase the power. What does the plane do when they increase the power? It keeps sinking a little bit. Well, we'll see later. because the Bureau of Economic Analysis seized the planes for a while. They've released them since, but they did seize them. The time to record, so to make a copy of the flight recorders. And it's one of the rare cases. It's one of those cases where we don't need to search through the wreckage to find the flight recorders. They are in place, they're intact and all that. It's quite easy to copy. What does Nouvelair do? He uses the control stick, then pushes the throttle to take off again. We'll see in the black boxes how the pilots of Nouvelair operated the mini stick east. What did they pull all the way? What was their action? But in any case, once they pull the stick and throttle up, the plane won't gain altitude right away. It will keep descending. And only from that point on will the engines really respond. Then they'll lift it up and it'll take off again. The people who are in the idiots are sitting quietly, and suddenly the plane vibrates. They hear a huge engine noise, and then it's the Nouvelair that flies over their heads. Apparently, according to what people can see with the naked eye, it was 3 meters away. It all happened within 3 meters. That means by just a small margin, the Nouvelair was about to hit the S if it had landed on them. That would have been a major accident, probably with a terrifying outcome. If we're talking about 300 people on both planes, we're sure we would have ended up with at least half of them, right? It was inevitable, perhaps even more. So now the Nouvelair is gaining altitude again. After narrowly avoiding them, it's gaining altitude again. And then he's going to circle around to come back and land. And you'll notice something. If you watch, you'll see that for the second approach, he'll do it. No matter the noise, he'll make a very long approach. So we don't have the black boxes yet and all that, but maybe it was discussed with the controller. But look at this. First, he followed the correct method to avoid noise. Second, he ignored the noise. He comes in on a long approach. He flies over Cap d'Antibes and has the runway in sight for a long time. He lands on the correct runway, 04 left. The idiots, what do? The pilots are shaken, you can imagine. We heard quite a few stories in the media, and we don't really know what's true and what isn't. But it seems that the captain was shaking and all that, and you put yourself in his shoes because he must have seen his last minute coming. In any case, the pilots, the Easyjet crew, were in such an emotional state that they decided not to leave. The flight was canceled that night. They came back to the terminal. Their story ended there, and we understand why. They escaped death that way. You can't just say, well, that's it, we escaped, let's take off anyway. And this too. What's good is that the fact they stopped allows the Bureau of Economic Analysis to access the plane, allows access to the recordings. Because there have been cases, even on this channel, where there was a very serious incident. Pilots continue as if nothing happened, and sometimes authorities don't learn about it until 10 or 15 days later. Sometimes through social media or newspaper comments, they step in to investigate, but by then it's too late. By then, all the black boxes have been overwritten. The planes are on the other side of the world, all that. So it's true that here it's good because everything has been captured. A few months ago, it was in France. I don't remember the airport. I had spoken to a young pilot who was in a propeller plane and was coming back to the runway. And then there was an Airbus behind him coming in to land on top of him. And actually, he got away. He managed to save the situation. He had a reflex because on the radio, he heard that there was a plane coming in behind him. He accelerated, left the runway, and the Airbus landed just after. So unfortunately, when this kind of situation starts to repeat itself, it tells us that something is going very wrong with the organization, with the governance, with the way things are being managed. Sooner or later, we'll end up with something big. So in this case, it's actually a very good thing that this incident happened, because it will allow everyone to become aware, to have a real investigation, maybe demonstrate ways to improve mechanisms that prevent future accidents. There you go. So thank you for listening to this video up to this point. And I'll quickly tell you about the aldosterone Aviation channel. How's it going? So I'm telling you about the old videos concerning accidents that happened 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. We even have accidents dating back to the 1950s. Well, those accidents, you can imagine that if I talk about them, it's like I'm talking about the Le Mans Cup in Mexico in 1986. So it's nice and all, but nobody cares. The YouTube algorithm won't promote that since people aren't searching for it. Whereas if I talk about a second division match that happened this morning, obviously I'll get more views, more revenue to justify the work. Another problem, the old ones, the videos about old cases, those are videos that require a lot of work. Right now, I'm working on an absolutely extraordinary video. Well, I've been on it for 3 weeks. I'm gathering the details bit by bit. And why? Because it happened in the 80s, of course. I found myself in a paradox. I make videos on old topics I consider very important. They have a lot of lessons. But at the same time, well, basically, nobody is interested. So what did I decide to do? I decided to keep doing those topics. I still keep doing them. And I put them either on Patreon or on the subscription section. Isn't it sponsor support of this YouTube channel? So what does that allow? It allows people who are really interested in these topics, who are interested in these videos, to support this work. What does it change compared to before? Before, I always had the Patreon, which was declining, which was emptying out completely, which was based on an honor system. So Patreon supporters didn't actually get exclusivity. I would upload videos there a little while before putting them online. So that meant a lot of people would think, I get it. Instead of paying on Patreon to see them a week or 10 days earlier, I just have to wait. The day he publishes them, I'll watch them like everyone else on YouTube. It's fine, there's no problem, except that after a while, it made me work. And in the end, those videos weren't paid at all. So I subscribed. What am I doing now? What am I doing differently? And when I explained that in a few words at the end of the 60s management video, after a lot of work and 44,000 views, I feel I can go to the beach. Commenting on Macron's visit to New York, I can get more views than that. You see what I mean? It's important because YouTube is also my job. It's not just a hobby, it's also my job. So when I do this work, it has to make economic sense as well. Otherwise, it's pointless. If every video makes me poorer, it's not worth it. So look, last time I mentioned this, I lost 1,500 subscribers in a few days. Well, there you go. It was pretty brutal. I was a little bit shocked. I didn't say anything wrong. I just said that losing 1,500 subscribers isn't a big deal. We'll get them back. So here's the idea. There will always be news videos here, and there will be the old videos too when I negotiate with sponsors, because there are sponsors who have come, who have approached the channel, who want to sponsor certain videos. In that case, it's great. A sponsor comes, he says, I'll fund 3 videos for you. I'll make them and they'll be public. There's no problem at all. The other videos will be on Patreon, as I said, or on the community section of the website, and they will never be public. The videos that are on Patreon, there are 3 today. There's a 4th one coming soon. The number will increase over time. They will only be available there. They will never be published on YouTube. That's the change. Thanks again to everyone who supports this channel, sometimes for years, making it possible. And honestly, look, I often do journalistic investigations or other things. And when I search in the French media, even though these French media receive subsidies that come from taxpayers' money, practically, they're all locked. Go find a newspaper today that publishes fully open articles for you. That doesn't exist anymore. Everything is locked. It's been like that for years. So I understand in a way that they have to do that, because otherwise they won't be able to. How will they support their journalists if everything is open and free? That's it. It's the same economic equation we face on YouTube. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I really wanted to explain. I really wanted to go all the way with the idea. And of course, I'm open to all your questions. Thank you again for listening to this video up to this point, and thank you to those who support the channel on Patreon. Without them, they wouldn't have been able to write, they wouldn't have existed. And then I'll see you in the next episode, quite simply. To all your questions. Thank you again for listening to this video up to this point. Thank you to those who support the channel on Patreon. Without them, they wouldn't have been able to write. They wouldn't have existed. And then I'll see you in the next episode, quite simply.